I have been an alcoholic for more than 10 years now. Last year was detox and rehab, closely followed by relapse central with a fellow inmate of detox, which led to his death. After that, of course, I went mad with the drinking, as I had a huge justification due to my boyfriend's death. Then it starts to take its eventual toll on my body. No appetite, tired all the time, not to mention no money or proper social life. I drink alone. I begin vomiting blood and end up in the hospital. Each time they detox me, I swear I'm done and try and get on with my life. I always go back to drink though, like a person with low self-esteem goes back to an abusive boyfriend. Last Tuesday, I wake in the middle of the night and the familiar vomiting of blood happens, except it's a lot. I don't even have time to hide the empty bottles of wine. I just call for an ambulance. I carry on being sick a lot and throw up red clots and start to feel weird. I'm dying. I just know it. I get to the hospital and I'm being given black liquid. It seems to be calming down and I think, a few days in the ward and I'll be okay. Then comes a huge amount of bright red blood, at least 2 pints, then everyone starts rushing around. I am panicking and feel like passing out. Machines are beeping loudly, and then they're rushing me through the hospital corridors to the resuscitation room. I'm grabbing every doctor or nurse and pleading with them to not let me die. I'm given a general anesthetic, then all of a sudden I'm waking up and they say they have saved me and stopped the bleeding. I spend the night in the intensive care unit, then transferred to a recovery ward. I just got home after 5 days. The image of all that blood will haunt me forever. They're even talking about specialist procedures in a liver unit to fix the damage I've caused by drinking. I am done. I'll be in a coffin if I carry on. I have taken it way too far. The craving has already set in. I'm detoxed so I don't feel ill, but I'm restless and bored. But I just think of all that blood and how terrible I felt, and I just know I have to take this one day, even 1 hour at a time. I can't go back. There's so much I haven't done or seen. I'm only 34. Alcohol is an insidious, life-destroying drug. The culture of booze is integrated and pervasive. Enough said. My own experience with alcohol is like many others. I won't bore you with the buildup. Suffice to say, I was a weekend drinker, social drinker for many years, starting in my 20s until my mid-40s. I never considered it a problem. I saw others with problems, even saw a friend drink himself to death. It didn't hit home because that wasn't me. I didn't have that kind of problem. The final trip, which really killed my love affair with booze and nearly killed me, started off normally. A weekend drinking, nothing too heavy, but I continued to drink every day, getting to a certain point, maybe half in the bag, once or twice fairly drunk. This continued for about 10 days or so. By this time, with my years of abuse, it took quite a bit to get half in the bag and a lot to get drunk. I was aware that something was wrong. I hadn't been to work in days. I told myself to stop, but I couldn't wean myself off. It just went on. Finally, I started to get scared, which made me drink more. I knew I couldn't go to work smelling like I did. I tried to stop, but encountered fierce withdrawal. Finally, I woke up one morning and my eyes were almost swollen shut, and I was terrified. I had to do something, so I called my employer, spilled my guts, and checked into rehab. It took hours to get in, at which point I was shaking badly and on the verge of freaking out completely. I finally got in and was given a Valium for my blood pressure. I was assigned a bed and I laid down to sleep, and I felt that everything would be alright. I couldn't have been more mistaken. I was jolted from a deep sleep by pure crystalline heart-stopping panic. I'd been asleep for maybe an hour, and no trace of the Valium remained. I later learned that elevated liver enzymes can burn through sedatives in a flash. I am emetophobic, and I felt like I was going to die. I found out that the nurses were not going to keep on giving me Valium, and so I gritted my teeth and hung on. I hallucinated. I stopped breathing. I couldn't sleep for fear my apnea would cause me to die in my sleep. I sweated and hallucinated some more. Horrible, mind-tearing visual and tactile hallucinations. I would fall asleep and wake up screaming, my heart pounding in my chest. I was convinced that wild dogs were in the room, trying to tear me apart. At this point, seizures were a very real danger. I begged them to give me something, anything, nothing, not even a Tums. Acid reflux was burning up my throat. My diarrhea was so bad, bile was running out of me, burning my ass. All the while, the terrible fear. After 6 or 8 hours of this, I couldn't take it anymore. I checked myself out against their advice, signed a release, and got the hell out of there. The moaning, zombie-like inmates shuffling around or puking blood in the washrooms, the worst smell I had ever smelt in my life. All my senses ridiculously heightened, smell, hearing, and touch. If a mouse farted, it would blast me out of a stupor. Once outside, I breathed the fresh air and felt a little bit better. I discovered that walking, mile after mile, feet in agony, back muscles spasming, was a good therapy, especially for the panic. The hospital was 10 miles away. I walked there, waited in the ER for another eternity, couldn't get in. I walked home maybe another 5 miles and tried to lay down, trembling, awful terror, hallucinated that there were worms in my veins. I felt like I had to crush the bulging veins to kill them. I fell asleep briefly near dawn, felt that the worst was over. It wasn't. Terrified all the next day, walked all over the city, trying to find someone to help me, a counselor, a priest, anything. It was Good Friday and I walked to a large church. It was closed. I fell down and started crying on the sidewalk. I'm not religious, but at that moment I prayed to God to help give me strength. I was a dirty, smelly outcast, and fortunately there weren't a lot of people around. I saw a notice for a clinic several miles away and walked there. I was completely exhausted and looked right at home with the street people in the waiting room. The mosaic tile on the floor looked like devil faces and tormented souls writhing in agony. I held on to a thread of sanity. I was ready to just step in front of a bus or train. Finally, a doctor saw me and gave me some electrolytes and some Ativan and maybe Librium, can't remember. I told them I was suicidal and a shrink saw me. I was sobbing like a child, and then the drugs took hold and I could pass out in an instant, but the slightest noise would wake me. Back in the waiting room, back to see another counselor, drug addiction counseling. Help numbers, a leaflet on AA and other groups. I felt so grateful. I walked home, spent 3 more days of rampant panic attacks, made almost bearable by the pills, and then the emotional and financial fallout. I was an emotional basket case for weeks afterward, and I should mention here that my employer was life-saving. They had put me on sick leave and welcomed me back and told no one. This act of kindness still makes me teary. I can't imagine what would have happened if I had lost my job. The stupidity of alcoholism didn't end there. I did this twice more. Finally, I killed it. My romance with this seductive, deadly poison was over. I no longer crave it or even feel any temptation or loss of social connection. It took me years to get to this point, but once I got there, it accelerated rapidly. It totally blindsided me. I don't care what anyone else does. I don't preach. If you want to drink, drink. Not me. I've had it. For years, I talked to my family and friends, but they just kinda blew it off like it was a typical relationship/marriage problems. I kept telling them that things were not okay, then he would be mean and his stories were never straight. He was a closet drinker. He would hold one beer and somehow get ridiculously drunk. At night, I would notice major behavior changes, but never was able to catch him drinking. One day, we were taking a stroll with our youngest son, and he couldn't walk straight. He kept saying he was okay and that I was imagining things. At one point, he lost his balance, and the stroller fell into the road. He pretty much gaslit me afterwards that me accusing him of drinking was absolutely outrageous on a Tuesday evening during a family walk. Long story short, when we separated, he moved into his own apartment. He was horrible during divorce proceedings, and his family and all of our friends took his side because they thought my accusations were just me being crazy. The day he passed away, the police found over 100 bottles of liquor, rotten food shoved inside all of his cabinets, receipts a mile long from the liquor store. His autopsy said his cause of death was chronic alcohol abuse, years. I called the coroner and he said that for him to die of alcoholism, he had to have been doing it for the last decade, if not longer. He died a few days before his 34th birthday. One of his friends reached out after the funeral and told me that he had confided in him and admitted to drinking about a fifth a day. I'm glad I made the decision I did for me and my kids. So many things happened during our marriage. We are lucky that we are all safe and alive. We were both professionals, so it was really shocking to everyone that took his side. I no longer talk to any of them, and I'm better off for it. So I guess if you have a gut feeling someone is drinking or acting strangely, they probably are. Trust your gut. My experience with alcohol has varied greatly over the years since my first drink at age 17. By this time, I had already been smoking pot for almost 2 years, so it wasn't my first experience with the psychoactive substance. I enjoyed the buzz, but certainly wasn't crazy about it. It sort of became a backup plan if I ran out of pot. Nothing excessive, just enough to make me feel warm and fuzzy. When I was 19, I moved to a different town and my herb smoking kind of tapered off. Maybe I outgrew it or something, I'm not sure. I went from smoking every day to once a week to once a month, if that. That year was my first experience where I was a full-on spinning, double vision, staggering drunk. Tequila was involved and I didn't enjoy it. Of course, no one told me that tequila is evil and sneaks up on you all at once. From then on, my alcohol use was fairly light, no more than 4 drinks at any given time and not on a daily basis, and it did not involve tequila. The next 3 years I stayed busy, held a regular job and all that good stuff. It wasn't until one day I found out that I, along with 20 of my colleagues, were being laid off because the company was in trouble. That night, 3 coworkers and I hit the bar. We drank all night until last call and headed to our respective homes, by taxi of course. The next 3 months I searched high and low for work unsuccessfully and eventually had to move into my mother's house. Unable to find work, living with my mom at 22 going on 23 and pissed off with my situation, I hit the bottle hard and daily. It started as drinking at night only, but every single night, progressing from a moderate buzz to borderline shit-faced. I started waking up with a hangover every morning, and the hangovers got worse and worse to the point where ibuprofen and a proper breakfast wouldn't cure it. I started using the hair of the dog remedy by adding a good-sized shot of whiskey to my coffee. This would be the point where my body became dependent on alcohol. Without that Eve opener, I would experience tremors and headaches. Eventually, I needed a double shot in my morning coffee, a couple of drinks throughout the day, and many drinks at night. The withdrawals got worse too. I even suffered what the emergency room doctor described as a mild seizure. I now couldn't go more than 4 waking hours without a drink. I continued to drink even after my episode that landed me in the emergency room, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I finally hit rock bottom when I got really drunk one night and trashed my mom's house, which I don't recall doing. But after nearly a pint of 151 and 6 twisted teas, who would? The following is what I was told. My mom called the cops, but instead of taking me to jail, they took me to the hospital because when they got there, I was sitting on the floor, barely able to sit up straight. Also, I blew a .425 blood alcohol level, which I'm told is dangerously high. The next thing I remember was coming back into reality, still rather drunk and trying to escape from the hospital. I figured I could get past the guards sitting outside my room, but didn't take into account that there may be 2 more guards right around the corner, which there were. I then accepted the fact that I was stuck. I had 2 options, a week in the detox and addiction counseling unit, or my mother was pressing charges, and I was going to jail for drunk and disorderly. Well, I chose option A, and I haven't had a drink in 24 days now. Life is less depressing without constant alcohol use or abuse as it was. I've been to some AA meetings and spoke with my doctor about the whole thing. There seems to be this common doctrine that alcohol addiction is a disease, and I have it. Basically, I'll never be able to enjoy a cold beer or 2 after a hard day's work or nice scotch on the rocks ever again. I'm not sure that I buy that. I know I had a bad habit, I know I had a chemical dependence, but I'm not sure that I buy into the fact that I have a disease or that alcoholism even is a disease. It could be that it's a disease of choice, but then it sort of strays from the classic definition of the word disease. I will, however, be taking a very long hiatus from alcohol, at the very least. Maybe after I'm happy with my life, I'll be able to handle alcohol responsibly like I once could. The question, however, still remains: habit, dependence, or disease?